Hi, my name's Ronnie Matthews. I'm the author of Cozy Small Town Romances, and I'm here today to talk to you about Melody Whispers, where we explore flawed characters and the journey of PTSD.
Welcome to Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance and books, where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week, I am sitting down with author Ronnie Matthews. We're talking about Ronnie's catalog of cozy, nostalgic, small-town romance books that balance witty banter with raw, character-driven healing arcs and emotional damage Ronnie is becoming known for. Stay until the end to hear Ronnie's very emotional and heartfelt love letter to her younger self. And you can also listen to me cry like a baby about it because it really hit home. Ronnie, welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Good. Well, this has been a long time in the making for several reasons. So, a few months ago, I think at this point, my sometimes co-host and co-producer Kaylee and I put together an episode, and she said, we have to talk about this book, Melody Whispers. And she was so sweet. She reached out to you, and I really appreciate in the midst of everything you had going on that you sent us in a love letter that we could put into that episode. And I highly recommend for anyone listening to go back and listen to that episode. But that was my introduction to you. I picked up the book because she had mentioned it and just said a few things about it that I would really love. And I entered the Ronnie Matthews world and your writing and your style. And I just instantly loved it. So with that intro, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast so we can kind of explore your catalog and your writing. So nothing new has been going on with you, right? Nothing these last few months, just totally life, just completely normal.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, just ticking on as I usually do. I'm usually never so put together like this. I haven't been for pushing 10 weeks today, actually. But yeah, I've got a little girl who's 10 weeks old. And yeah, life is crazy, but best thing ever.
Yeah. Oh, I can feel that. I can feel that like radiating off of you. And I so appreciate that you took the time to meet with me and sit down for this podcast because I am just excited to explore your writing, your characters, and these worlds you're building. So, set us up. What is the Ronnie Matthews universe that we enter when we open one of your books? How would you describe your writing?
I think the first thing I want readers to experience is just a cozy, familiar, almost like a nostalgic feeling. Like they've been there before, they don't know the characters. There's a homey feeling to it. I want them to relate to the characters, one or two of the characters on some level within the first few pages as well, whether it's a quirky little idiom that the character says or the struggles that they share with the reader straight away. A hug, because I'm not going to hug the readers throughout the whole book. I do a bit of emotional damage sometimes, and I do apologize for that. But yeah, nostalgia.
Nostalgia. I actually don't think anyone has come on this podcast before and said that, and I really love that. And I was kind of wondering what it was in the first few pages of Melody Whispers that really pulled me in. And like what it was I was connecting with. And now that you're saying that, I'm like, oh no, that makes perfect sense. So you just mentioned something, emotional damage. So let's talk about that a little, of your like particular style of emotional damage, because I was really pulled into the story that I read and the way you addressed it. And we'll unpack that in a little bit. But when you say, you know, my writing has the emotional damage somewhere in there, what does that mean to you? And what does that mean to the reader?
I want them to go from point A to point B with the characters, whatever, you know, whether they've got a lot of trauma to unpack, whether they're overcoming, you know, issues between family members or their fears. I want them to feel every single emotion that the character does, because I think it makes it so much more raw and realistic. And especially if it's not an experience that the reader has lived themselves, because we pick up books and constantly we're learning. And it doesn't matter if it's romance. I know people love to bash and how you learn it. I've learned so much from romance. It's diversified my mind massively. I think that's where the emotional damage comes in. I do love to see readers cry. It's awful, but that's like the aim. And they know I love it. I tell them that it fuels the next book, so they're fine with it.
Oh gosh, I have so many things I want to touch on in what you said. Well, one of them is learning from romance. And it's not the only genre we touch on this podcast, but it's a majority of what I talk about because I feel like I, as well, learn so much in romance. So, from your perspective, what are some of the myths and misconceptions about the genre in general?
Uh, it's poorly written and rushed, I think, is the biggest thing. I think people see it and I think they get scared of it. I think they get scared of the sex in the books, especially if they've never read it before. It can be intimidating, but it's healthy. You know, many of us, it's part of our lives. But it also shows connection between the characters on a totally different level. Whether it's one chapter, it's the biggest slow burn of your life. You know, to me, those aren't just parts of the book that you can take out. The story wouldn't make sense without it, in the way that my books are written. And I think a lot of authors, I think that's a big misconception.
Yeah. I do think it's so interesting how people are scared of it, yet at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, they are not scared about reading harm against women or women being put in these miserable situations. Like that is totally normalized. And
Yeah.
even going back into what I used to read growing up, I read so much Philip Roth growing up, and man, does he like to torment women a little bit. And I was thinking about all of the books that I read, or even John Irving, who I think is a beautiful writer. And I do love the way he writes women, but he really puts them through it. And I'm not 100% sure that the payoff is there at the end where you feel like they come out on the other side. It's almost like this trauma and transformation without the healing. And so when we get into a genre like romance where there is a bit more softness, and I don't want to, paint it with a broad stroke, but like there's just something more rewarding for the women in the stories. I love how that scares people. Yet you could turn on TV and it's like violence against women is like totally normalized.
Yeah.
And I could get on my soapbox and talk about this forever because I'm like all about the ladies and I want people to feel safe and seen and secure. And I think that that's what really attracts me to certain writers because I feel like they love their characters. And I felt that in Melody Whispers. And like, there's so many things about the book. So like, I actually want to dive into it a little bit because right away, and we have a cat joining us for anyone listening, and she is displeased with the heat that Ronnie and I were talking about before we started recording. So maybe she'll calm down. But when I first opened your book, and you can laugh as I say this, there was almost something like musical about it. Like it had like a fast beat. Like there was a lot of momentum. That. I don't know if I'm using the right words, but that's what kind of spoke to me. And I was just kind of pulled in by the amount of joy in your main female character. I just felt she had like life thrumming through her. And I was just really attracted to it. And then you bring us into this story where they go on this massive journey together in a short period of time. So that's my summary of it. But can you tell us a little bit about this book for anyone who's sort of meeting you with that book or with this episode?
There's a lot of healing that goes on. Not just, it's easy when you pick up the book that, so Warren, the main character, he goes through this journey. He has PTSD. He has lived with it for a long period of time and has almost become a shell of his former self. And throughout the story, we see him putting in that work. It's easy to then oversee Harriet's journey. She's experiencing motherhood, pregnancy for the first time, and she really wants to balance her career as a songwriter. I don't have experience with PTSD personally, but whilst I was writing the book, I was pregnant and I very much didn't want to lose my identity as Ronnie outside of being an author. I didn't want it to just become, I'm a mother now. And so when I knew that I was going to write an accidental pregnancy book, that was really important to me for Harriet's character too. So we go through both those journeys and how they really intertwine. Warren's almost given up on life. He doesn't see any kind of happiness into being introduced now after a traumatic experience. And then in comes Harriet, and his world is completely flipped upside down. And she's had a bit of a rough time with an ex and just feeling a little bit betrayed. And then there's this pretty salt and pepper head man that just is all in, despite everything he's gone through, everything he's feeling, his mental health, he's all in. And he doesn't hesitate at a single part in that book, even when the going gets tough. And it's just an imperfectly perfect love story of healing.
Oh, there's so much there when you're talking about the birth journey, right? But also the rebirth journey, that they're kind of in a parallel process, very different, by the way, but
Yeah.
coming back to life in yourself in a way that you think all is lost. There's no coming back from this. And I have had my own experience with very severe PTSD. I've talked about it on the podcast before in a general way, but it's interesting because I've noticed that I'm very drawn to people who write about it in a way that feels very true and realistic. Not that everyone has my same experience, but in a theme that most survivors with PTSD experience, where it's not this acute thing that, you snap your fingers, it goes away, you never deal with it again.
Yeah.
And it can be a little insidious and a little heavy and show up in these like strange moments, almost showing up in moments of joy. And that can surprise you of like, why am I feeling this here? I should be feeling differently. And you just really kind of second guess yourself. So I really appreciate when we see an imperfect journey of something. And I wanted to explore that with you a little bit, because one thing I noticed in this book, and Kaylee and I talked about it too, is that, Harriet's not putting the spotlight on him and like, so tell me about it. What happened?
Yeah.
We're going to get through this, right? And I say that as someone who experienced that a lot in my life, where people were like, tell me the facts. We're going to explore your PTSD and then it's going to be over because it's inconvenient. And so in this book, there's a very different approach to it. And I want to know why you chose to take that route and how you feel about it now.
I'm really proud of that aspect of the book, because whilst Harriet is in the dark for part of the story, the readers aren't. There are scenes where we see interactions between Warren and his therapist. A therapist at first that was assigned by the fire department so he could get back on duty. And then slowly, as the story unravels, he uses that to his advantage to help him not heal, not get better. And it was really important that it was really clear there's no healing. There's, it's always going to be a part of him and his PTSD and the trauma he went through. But he knows he has to start putting in a bit of work, because that's what it takes, whether it's reaching out to someone, medication. And we go through that journey with Warren, and Harriet's not there for the entirety of it. And I think that was special to me, because I think it showed the almost like a two perspectives of it, two sides of the coin of it between the characters.
Yeah. It's interesting because traumatic experiences are usually very isolating. I say usually, they could be different. It could be, but for me, very isolating. And yet your healing journey there's almost this assumption that it's a group project and everyone gets to weigh in on it and it has to be public and almost performative. Meanwhile, some of it's kind of like yucky and gross and like doesn't feel that good, and it brings up other things that you don't even think are associated with it. And I'll make a small parallel here. I used to run a support group for breast cancer survivors who were in treatments and post-treatment, and everyone assumed that everyone came in and always talked about cancer, and they didn't. They talked about previous traumatic experiences that the cancer sort of brought to the surface. So I really appreciate any story where we can kind of drop in deep and almost like you said, learn and feel expansive in our empathy and understanding, and say, oh, we don't have to go through everything that the characters are going through, or nor should we have. That would be a little strange. It's about kind of tapping into that emotion and just having a greater understanding. And I want to ask you about that as someone who's writing in this space. I don't know. What do you think about being part of that, where somebody could like pick up one of your books and have a broader understanding of PTSD and show up in their own life in a different way? maybe for someone that they love and care about.
That's one of the most powerful things and the most rewarding things, I think, when every time you release a book, whether it's one person, multiple people, and sometimes the aspects and characteristics of characters that readers have messaged or emailed me about that they've related to, I didn't even think about that. It was just kind of a little nuance, and it's, you know, whether it's, I had a character who had a late diagnosis of ADHD, part of my story, and I knew people could relate to it, but just to the level that people did, I was in tears constantly just reading people's messages. And I think to be seen when you least expect it is like, it's one of those things I can't really put into words. I've picked up a book and I've closed it and finished it and just been awestruck and without words for hours sometimes.
Oh, I love that phrase, to be seen when you least expect it. I'm just going to be chewing on that for the rest of the episode because that actually really sums it up perfectly. You know, when you've just kind of a little awestruck by a book, or somebody can put into words things you've not been able to put language to, and it's just there. And I think that that's really beautiful. But part of that is a risk. And I kind of want to dive into this too, because when you touch on topics where you do drop a little bit deeper into those like third level emotions, just what's under and what's under and what's under the surface, right? Where a lot of people don't go in their daily lives. Like how would we function, right? If we were constantly an open system, but you take us there. But then you also have to navigate the reactions because not everyone's ready to go there, right? So what am I trying to say here is I appreciate hearing a flawed journey, reading about flawed characters, reading about growth and expand and having a seat in the passenger seat as they're on their journey and developing skills and coming to realizations and awareness. But what is that like for you to do that and to maybe not write like a polished, perfect character who doesn't make any mistakes?
I, do not pick up my books if you were expecting those polished characters. I don't want you to always understand their intentions within the first few chapters. I'm not going to give everything away. I drip feed a lot to the frustration of some people, and I appreciate that is my style. I really want to drag it out sometimes. I have beta readers and they're like, I think you need to give the readers a little bit more there, Ronnie. I'm like, no, it's my story. But there is a fine balance. I think I will always and continue to write about mental health in my books. And that is something people get uncomfortable with, or if they've been in the unfortunate position where they haven't had a lapse in their mental health, it can be very difficult to relate to a character. And why are they miscommunicating? That's a big thing. I could stand on my own soapbox and talk about miscommunication and is it miscommunication? But yeah, don't go in with the assumption that they're all going to be perfect, because it's all about the journey and very character driven stories.
You know what I used to say when I was practicing as a psychotherapist is that everyone is pro mental health until mental health walks in the room in its rawest, most vulnerable form. And I don't say that to cast aspersions or point a finger at anyone. It's just this awareness of like, oh, that's what empathy looks like. That's what boundaries look like. That's what understanding 100%. Looks like when it's in the room with me, not just this like meme on social media of like, check on your strong friends. It's actually like, this is what it looks like. Sometimes your strong friends don't have the words to tell you what something feels like. And so when you're talking about your writing style, I actually like that because I feel like it's showing what it's like to embody an experience, to have your words almost trapped in your throat, not able to say to someone what you want to say, or not even have the awareness. And I love your approach of like, hey, this might not be for you or might not be what you want to read. So tell me, how do you get yourself there? Because not everyone feels that way. Some people want everyone to like what they wrote, but you're saying I'm trying to speak to an audience that wants this.
I would love someone to give my books a try if it's something that they've never touched on before. But I think as an author, I can't be under the assumption that everyone's going to love my books, because I don't love all books in the world, you know? They're not everyone's cup of tea. I think if even you close the book, one of my books, and you go, I don't really like it, I hope you've learned something. Then you don't have to like the characters. You don't have to like anything about it, but you can go, oh wow, I didn't realize, that is a symptom of PTSD, or this is what it looks like for someone to be like diagnosed with ADHD,
Yes.
or So if that's the takeaway, great.
Oh, I
I
love
think that's all I can
that.
ask for. You've
Such
read my
like
book, so
right? Such an easygoing approach. I love it. Well, I'm really interested in the characters who make the mistakes, because I feel like that's just a like almost like a juicy story to unfold. Like, how do I fix this? How do I make amends? How do I bring myself to awareness? But I am curious about you as a writer, and what brought you to that space where that interests you and you feel comfortable or confident writing about that.
I think accountability is something we're not always very good at. I've definitely had to learn that. I'm a very stubborn individual. And I would try and convince someone I haven't done anything wrong until, I'm blue in the face. And I'll hold myself accountable to that. And that's been a huge learning curve for me as I've kind of left my teenage years and gone through my 20s and into my 30s. And I suppose touching on the previous topic we talked about, where we don't really understand mental health until we're in it, ourselves, and that was my experience. I'd made a lot of mistakes with that. I tried to push people away, and whilst it's not an excuse, I don't think mental health should ever be an excuse. It's a reason. And I held my hands up to the people in my life, and I was like, listen, I've not been honest with you. I'm in a really dark place. I'm putting on a smile. I'm trying to attend work. I'm trying to go about my life. And then one day it just all came tumbling down. I was having like panic attacks from my now husband. He was my fiance at the time, and to me, I made a mistake in assuming that it would all be okay, and assuming that I could do it myself. And that really actually introduced me to my debut book. It was a big reflection of my relationship with mental health with the female main character. It can be really uncomfortable to say and sit there and go, oh, I've made an error. I've said the wrong thing. I've done the wrong thing. I've upset someone. My words unintentionally, maybe it's some form of, ignorance. I've upset someone, and it can be so uncomfortable. I also work in HR, so uncomfortable is kind of the be all and end all of it. So I just love diving into that. And the characters will always hold themselves to account. There will never be a time where they just brush it under the carpet. And whether it's, small little gestures, a grand gesture, having a really heartfelt conversation between the two characters, there is always that accountability on page for the readers to understand whether they've been on the side that I've experienced, or they are angry at the character and they're waiting for that apology themselves. So
it's interesting because you mentioned the word discomfort. And I always think about the relationship between discomfort and vulnerability, because discomfort can rise and we can think, well, I'm in pain. And it's like, no, discomfort and pain are different. And pain can make you feel like you're being threatened. And it's like, no, those things are very different, right? But when we don't bring awareness to them, we can confuse them. So what is it about discomfort and vulnerability that shows up in your books?
I think the vulnerability is when the characters aren't just truthful with themselves, but their significant other, they're opening up about a lot of the time in my books, it's something they've been ashamed of for a long time. So with Warren, he did have a sense of shame around his PTSD. He was worried how it would impact this new relationship where he's trying to co-parent with this basically complete stranger, or so that's the vulnerability side. And I think the discomfort is usually in the moment or the build up to it. I tend to do this a lot, is I will try and convince myself not to do something by all these different ideas and outcomes in my head before I've even done it. And I'm like, I'm going to be so uncomfortable in that moment. I'm not going to do it, you know? So,
And
you know,
that
when you
moment will
get
go on forever. Like it will never end, right?
never,
Yes.
never. But when you're in that character's POV, I want you to feel the discomfort from them. I want you to feel like their skin tighten and, you know, their muscles tense. I need people to understand why someone is making a mistake.
Yeah.
And there is reasons behind that. It's not just because they're a bad individual and their moral compass is all over the place.
Well, what would be the message you would want a reader to take away about vulnerability after putting down one of your books?
I hope it would encourage someone to be vulnerable, honestly, especially around mental health, because that was the biggest thing for me, was being vulnerable and speaking out to my husband, you know, going to my doctor, going on medication. That was the most vulnerable thing I've ever done. But I think with vulnerability comes huge amounts of bravery, huge amounts of bravery. And I think that's forgotten a lot of the time. I think once you take that first step, and I do reference mental health a lot in kind of my experiences, but I think once you take that first step, I've done the big thing. Now recognize it, celebrate it, don't forget that and hold on to it and use that to help others if you ever come across it. Because now that you've experienced it, you can relate to it and you can help other people. And I think that's kind of a hook, line, and sinker with mental health. You just, yeah, it's there forever. So,
And I appreciate you talking about it this way. Well, let's dive in a little bit to your catalog, right? Because I've met you at one point in your writing, and I know you have another book coming out, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But like, take me on the journey from Ronnie the night before she publishes her very first book to now you're just in the zone. So tell me about that time when you were first putting out this very first book, and tell me which one it was.
so those two words is my debut. It is a 4 series set in Sutton Bay in Maine. And the idea came to me during a really dark time. I always like to preface this with people was that I didn't grow up wanting to be a writer. The fact that I am an author at this moment and have 5 books published is insane to me. Like if you had told me 4 years ago I would be sitting here talking about books I'd published, I'd be like, shut up. Absolutely not. It really was a spur of the moment decision. I wanted to write about my experience, and I have always been a lover of romance. I've been in the space. I was a bookstagrammer before this as well. Yeah. And I just started writing this story, didn't think it would go anywhere. And I had a lot of encouragement from colleagues, fellow authors to this day who were like, hey, Ronnie, like, do it, do the thing. And I did the thing the night before publishing those 2 words. I think I was just freaking out with probably anticipating Amazon messing it up somehow, you know, with that, just those last minute worries. And that was a really vulnerable thing. I think putting books out is so vulnerable because you are opening yourself up to criticism that us authors, you know, sometimes don't ask for. It's kind of shoved in our faces, but we're putting a piece of our hearts out to the world. And once you click that button and it's published, it's out of our hands a lot of the time. I'd love to say those anxieties the day before publishing day disappear. It doesn't. I think I was most calm during my latest release, but I had a lot of other things to worry about. And I kept telling my friends that I was like, I'm a month from giving birth. This is just, let's just press the button and see what happens. But it's been a whirlwind. Like I said, I never expected to ever be an author a few years ago. A lot has happened. I didn't expect my books to get the kind of traction they have either. And for people to actually enjoy them. And I know that sounds really silly, but I never expected people to enjoy them on this level and to be able to relate to these random 2 people that, you know, popped into my head one day and ended up on a Word document.
I love the way you talk about it. It's so funny. It's very relatable, right? And I want to ask you just a little bit about the journey you're going on now moving forward. So you opened us up to, I say the word universe, and I always assume people think I'm talking about like fantasy and like wings or something. I'm like, no,
No.
but like the sort of the Melody Whispers universe, right? Like
Yeah.
you've opened us up in this direction. Can you tell us about the direction you're going in now with your writing and what we can expect?
So it's very much the same. I love with my small town series is the balance between those emotionally taut moments and witty banter. I want you to be close to tears on one chapter, and then the next you're laughing with the characters and just their silly little thoughts inside their head. I am working on a kind of secret project. I kind of speak about it a little bit now, and it's really gritty. It's very different from my small town. It's a little bit suspenseful. I'm dipping my foot into a slightly different side of contemporary romance. And at the same time, I'm balancing a marriage in crisis. So the second book in the Iris Meadows series. So hopefully we can expect to see something about the secret project soon. I'm just in the deepest depths of edits. So
And that's
yeah.
for Country Vows is the book you're
So
referencing?
this is a secret project. Country Vows is it's about halfway done. The first draft. I love being back in that universe because I haven't been in Iris Meadows for a couple of months.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really nice, but the two stories are very, very different. Yeah.
What do you think inspired you to take that turn in, a different, I don't want to like put the label on, it's not like complete genre, it's still romance, but like, the darker, grittier, like why did you make that turn?
I wish it was really some like whimsical, like out of body experience, but it's one of those where authors are just kind of sitting there or we're driving somewhere and an idea pops into your head. And I was like, I need to write this down. I need to write this down. I pulled over, wrote this in my notes. I was like, right, motorcycle club, revenge plot. And then I wrote maybe 5,000 words, got distracted, kind of forgot about it. And then when I revisited it, I was like, this is my soul book. But I just couldn't see the witty banter as much. It's not cozy. So, I like to promote my small towns as cozy. It's not cozy. And it really stemmed from there. And I'm really excited to hopefully share it into the world at some point. For now, we'll remain in the cozy small town Ronnie verse.
Oh, I love it. Well, that's really exciting. And I think what I'm kind of taking from what you're saying is maybe like a bigger, deeper lesson of just like, you have no idea the direction your own story is going in. And that inspiration and creativity can come at you sideways and you have to pull over and write in your notes app. But like, how does that relate to the greater experience of anyone who's listening? Because we're not just talking about writing when we talk about that. We're talking about life experiences as women, as you go through the lifespan and you think, oh, this is it. This is the only thing. And something can surprise you. And I've noticed that a lot in our conversation today of like, if you had told me 4 years ago that I would be doing this, I wouldn't believe you. And it's like, okay, now if we had told you 2 years ago that you'd be taking a direction, still in cozy, but then going darker and grittier, like you probably wouldn't have believed it. And I feel like there's a deeper lesson there of like, we don't have to be so rigid with ourselves. Like we can be surprised by our own journey. And I think it's interesting how we're also in the same conversation talking about PTSD, because that is the number one thing that trauma does not allow you to do is be surprised by life and experiences and feelings, because you have to predict everything because something horrible happened. So now you've got to be hyper vigilant. And I think it can keep you really constricted, right? So here we're on this journey with you, and at every turn, you're kind of opening yourself up and being brave and vulnerable. And I really think that there's something beautiful there. And I don't know. I love that we've had this conversation about it. So
one of the dedications of my debut was do the thing. And I think I live by that now. Obviously, I am a grown adult with adult responsibilities. I have to take some caution in what I'm doing. But yeah, best thing I've done.
Do the thing. Well, the reminder someone needs today, I'm not saying it's me, it might be me, but whoever's listening. So tell us a little bit about what has inspired you, or maybe who has inspired you? Because I actually didn't, and I do quite a bit of research. I, for some reason, did not realize you were a bookstagrammer before you became an author. So tell me a little bit about your loves. Who did you love reading?
I fell in love with Becca Mack and her book Consider Me. It is a comfort read. I have read it multiple times. I've read it through audio, and I just loved the relationship between not just the main characters, but her side characters as well. And I think she did an amazing job of, like I said, balancing those emotional moments with the funny moments. And I think that really inspired me. I didn't want to just kind of go in that single direction of the emotion that the readers are going to experience. And then as I've started to read more, I definitely, the likes of Jennifer Hartman and Julie Ann, just those are really some like gut wrenching books. I love to cry when I'm reading, so I'm like, why don't I just make my readers cry as well?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's funny. My friend Juliet, who I used to work with, she's done episodes on this podcast before. I remember we were in a meeting, like a random work meeting about something totally different. And she was talking about being in a reading slump. And I was like, girl, do I have the book for you that will take you out of the reading slump? And obviously it was Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. And it just like
I was like
resuscitated
hoping you'd
her.
say that.
Yeah, exactly. It just brought her back to life. And she was like, I don't know what was in that book, but I have returned to the land of the living. Like, this is the book I needed. And I think for a lot of people, we have those books that, for whatever reason, like we've stepped away or we're feeling uninspired and they kind of pull you back in. And I think that's incredible. Is there anyone that you're reading now that you really love that you'd like to introduce this audience to?
I have really struggled with reading recently.
Oh, with a new baby and writing?
With a new
And yeah,
baby
right?
and writing. Like, writing has absolutely taken over my life. I'm like
Yeah.
trying to do it while she's napping. But I actually picked up What Saves Us by Maggie Gates. Yeah. And I actually messaged her because there was a part in the book where we go through the postpartum journey with the female main character, and I was in tears because I was like, I have never seen it written like this. And as someone postpartum, I messaged her and I was like, thank you so much, because I was sending like a screenshot of it, because it's not always fun. It's messy and it's really emotional, and it was nice that it wasn't sugar coated. And it was almost like I was meant to pick up that book, and I hadn't read a book. I'm a really quick reader. Usually I can finish a book off in a day. It's taken me weeks at the minute to finish a book. I finished it in like 30 hours. I couldn't put it down. So yeah. And I know it's part of a series. I read the last book in the series, which I don't usually do. So I need to go back and read the first two now.
I love that. Maggie is a repeat guest in this podcast. I really enjoy her writing. So that is one of her books I have not read. So I feel like I'm going to add that to my list as soon as we get off this podcast, because I do love that. And that moment when you see yourself on the page and it affirms something and you feel seen and heard, I feel like that is one of the things about this genre that just stands out so much. And I feel like it's very easy to dismiss when women do anything, which, if you've been in the world, anything that women enjoy or feel or think, it's just up for ridicule. So right. So I do think it's really important that we encourage these stories and we continue to hold this space and drop into those deeper emotions and just remind people, like, you are allowed to explore these topics. It's not one and done. And one of the things that, and again, I think it's interesting that you did write this beautiful book about PTSD. I feel like it allows people to kind of process the emotions without the high consequence experience of going through it in your own life. And I think that there's a lot of healing there. Like this last week, I did an episode with another author, Allie Roberts. She's my sometimes co-host. She comes on the podcast and we talk about other people's books. We never talk about her books, and she was talking about how for so long in her life, she'd focused on all of those self-help books. And while they're very valid and they can really help you process and break down something, she was like, it just wasn't doing the thing I thought it would do when I read them. And then I started reading romance again, and it was just helping me tap into all of these emotions. So I love that about that. And I picked up your book and I instantly felt that. And I just love having these conversations with writers in this space. So, I mean, Ronnie, thank you so much for this discussion, but we are not quite done yet because the name of this podcast is Love Letters and Books. And I always like to take time at the end of the episodes for anyone who's joining me for the first time, for you to read a love letter, either to your younger self or to your readers. So Ronnie, do you have a love letter for us today?
I do. Oh gosh, I can't promise I won't cry when reading it. I cried when writing it. I do. I have a love letter to my younger self, to two versions of my younger self.
Well, I'm ready for it. I might cry too. So let it rip.
Dear Ronnie, you're 16, 10 and 17 this November, and right now life feels a little rough. Your parents are divorcing, you're experiencing every emotion under the sun. People you once thought were friends have turned their back on you, and you feel like it's you against the world. You crave to be understood, to not be seen as too loud, too angry, too over the top. You want to fit in so hard, you start to lose yourself. 16 really sucks, and I wish I could tell you it gets better, and it does for a little while, but then a darkness comes just shy of your 30th birthday. You've felt it before, this overwhelming sense of dread, like it could swallow you whole. And depression is seen as a bad word to so many, and during this time, you think it is a bad word. You do your best to hide your sadness in the world and put on a brave face. And I really wish I could be there to hold your hand during that time. But I want you to know we make it, we overcome it, we conquer it. The darkness never lasts, and the bravest thing you ever do is ask for help. But what does last are the beautiful people in our life. You have an amazing husband who supports you tirelessly. Your parents are happy, and your big sister is your best friend. You have a group of girls who are your ride or dies. And as I write you this letter, our baby girl is sleeping on our chest. You come out of the other side, and one day you'll decide to write a book. It isn't just a love story between two fictional characters. It's a story of strength, perseverance, and learning to know it's okay to not be okay. The story is messy at first. The words don't make a lot of sense to you, but deep in our heart, we know it's special. And you might think people aren't going to be interested in reading anything we have to put there. They'll think it's awful, because how could we ever write something worthy of people to read? Do not stop writing the book. This book will change your life. This book will be cathartic. And this book will be called Those Two Words. And it is just the beginning. I wish I could see your face when readers message you to tell you how understood they felt reading Joanna's story. I wish I could relive the moment a reader told us she'd never felt more seen than reading Florence's experiences with ADHD. I wish I could see your face when we signed with the literary agent weeks before giving birth. I wish I'd believed in our younger us more. 18 years on, we are loud, we are over the top, and we do get angry sometimes. But we found our passion, something that makes our hearts sing, and the words we share with the world don't just mean something to us, but hundreds of others. So when the time comes and you open up that Word document, please don't doubt yourself, because one day you'll write the end of your very first book. I'm proud of you, I'm proud of us, I'm proud of the words we share with the world.
Well, you didn't cry, but I did.
I'm really trying to hold it together a bit. Woo!
Oh, that
It was cathartic in itself to write. So thank you for making me do that project.
I'm sure you needed more catharsis postpartum. I'm so glad I could add to your load at this time. But no,
Oh, it felt good.
Good. Oh, Ronnie, that was so beautiful. And I just really appreciate you inviting us into that space and that part of your journey. I truly do. And I feel that in your writing. So thank you so much for being here with us. And for anyone listening who wants to learn more about Ronnie, I will make sure to put all of her links in the show notes. And again, the book I picked up that kind of inspired this episode was Melody Whispers. So Ronnie, thank you again for joining us. I so appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It means so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandbookspodcast@gmail.com.